Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us this morning at Vivo Health. So my name is Avril Ivory, and I'm a health psychologist and a psychotherapist, and I wanted to talk to you this morning just about different aspects of psychological well-being. So this is one of my favorite topics because, as a health psychologist and psychotherapist, they're kind of two different bodies of work, if you like. One is about helping somebody have really good psychological well-being from a top-down perspective, and a lot of psychotherapy involves talk therapy, for example, where we're using, techniques like reframing the way we see things, looking at how we respond in our daily lives now that may be linked to previous events in our early lives, etc. So that's psychotherapy has a lot of what we call top-down regulation, where you're viewing the world differently and you learn tips and techniques to view the world differently. But the other part of psychological well-being, and I want to talk to you a lot about this morning, is what we call bottom-up regulation. And that basically means changing how you feel about the world by changing how your physiology responds to the world, okay? And so this is what we call kind of balancing the nervous system or down-regulation of nervous system. So I want to talk to you a good bit about this, and then the talk will take about 40 minutes. I see probably some of you just joining now. So those of you just joining late, my name is Avril Ivory, health psychologist, psychotherapist, here with Vivo Health. So this talk takes about 40 minutes, and then you can put any questions there that you want in the chat at the end. I will answer them. And then you can go to the networking, which I think goes on till about 12:30. So the key aspect, and I know we said we try and do kind of 8 different aspects of well-being, and it's so difficult to pin it down just to 8. But what I wanted to talk to you about today is, first of all, wanted to talk to you about understanding your nervous system and how you regulate the nervous system. And I want to talk to you about well-being. So many people, their psychological well-being has been tested to the very limit in this last year that we've had. And what I want to talk to you about is some of you may have experienced even almost micro traumas from this pandemic, if not a full kind of feeling of overwhelm. And one of the greatest ways to recover psychologically is to keep your nervous system in balance, and also to do a thing called improving your vagal tone. So I want to talk to you about this nerve, which is a vagus nerve. It's the 10th cranial nerve, and it comes down from the brainstem down into the gut. And if we have good vagal tone, we feel psychologically resilient. And even if something is really stressing us out, we bounce back quickly, we recover quickly from stress. And you see, if we can balance our vagal tone and balance our nervous system, it's easier for us to regulate our emotions. And this is, psychology is very much heading in this direction, that we are mind. So yes, sometimes we need to reframe things and explore things in our minds and see things in a different way. But very often we also need to help our nervous system to stay in balance, so that up the vagus nerve, it sends a message up to the brain to say, nothing to see here, no problems here, this person is not under threat. I'm laughing as I was preparing this talk this morning because as a health psychologist, I would know so much of this. I practice so many techniques in my own life so that I would have my nervous system in balance. But I've just come through weeks of working in and sometimes under kind of pressurized circumstances, working with people who are really struggling with their mental health. And I was saying to myself this morning, I'm giving a talk on rebalancing, particularly cortisol and vagal tone. And I could feel cortisol in my body when I woke up this morning, because I've basically been, working to this deadline and then saying, oh, I have the long weekend off, care activities and all my rebalancing, and bring my nervous system back in balance. But don't do what I'm doing in terms of don't let it happen. Busy in your work or too busy in your life, and you're not doing your different activities that make sure you're not secreting cortisol, because this morning I definitely could feel a little bit of cortisol in my system. So let's start with cortisol, because we'll talk about how we reduce cortisol and how that helps us develop emotion. And we'll also talk then about different techniques that really help us, like savoring, for example, practicing gratitude, training our brains to be up, and practicing self-compassion. These are all key activities that retrain our brains to stay in out of the amygdala, which is where we often have too many emotions, experiencing fear. So first of all, our nervous system, and any of you who have done Leaving Cert Biology will remember this really well. Our nervous system is in two parts. It's in the sympathetic, which is the fight or flight, and it's in the parasympathetic, which is the digest. Now, even before the pandemic started, many of us were spending too much time in the fight or flight, in this sympathetic nervous system where we just didn't feel completely relaxed in ourselves. And actually, yes, there is an adaptive function to being in fight or flight in this. But really, we want to spend as much of our lives in parasympathetic as possible, because this is where we feel really well. This is where people and socially engage. This is where we sleep properly in our bodies, and where we can really focus and concentrate and be productive. But what happens is, because we live in man, so much of us, and particularly, that we all are supposed to be so good at so many things and to be able to manage so many situations, and our Western culture is very much striving culture, mastery culture, and this has a lot of us tipped into this sympathetic dominance. And when we're in sympathetic dominance, what happens is, we have less saliva in our mouths, our digestive system shuts down, and our pupils dilate. And what happens is, it's an evolutionary function. There's a bear in the wood. We need to get away from the bear in the wood. So secrete cortisol, which will mobilize your glucose reserves, which, pools the blood kind of in the center of the body, gives you the energy to get away from the bear in the wood. But what's happening in modern lives is people euphemistically are seeing a bear in the wood several times in the day. So they're releasing a little bit of adrenaline each time. And then after a period of time, the pituitary hypothalamus in the brain says, I can't keep on stressed out here, and that you're releasing a bit of adrenaline. So I'm going to up a gear in your physiology, and we're going to start secreting a chemical, and that is called cortisol. And so if we allow ourselves to get into an overwhelm, or like me in the last, too busy and not doing my yoga practice and my daily swims, the system moves just that a little bit out of parasympathetic into sympathetic, and we start secreting cortisol. Now, how would you know if you were secreting too much cortisol? Well, the first thing is you might have early morning waking. So, you might wake 5:30, 6 o'clock before your alarm goes off and have difficulty back to sleep. Cortisol is different for different people. In the clinic at the moment, we're seeing a lot of people who are feeling the pandemic and who are definitely secreting that little bit of cortisol in their systems, a little bit more than they should be. And they are presenting things with like a feeling that the breath, that the chest feels a little bit tight, or they may feel that they have like a knot in their stomach or butterflies in their stomach, or what I'm seeing a lot of is in with, shoulders, the trapezius muscle is really tight, the neck is tight, or the jaw is tight, and they say to me, oh, my dentist, I was at the dentist, and my dentist says that I need a splint because I'm grinding my teeth at nighttime, or my jaw is clenched a lot of the time. These would be typical signs of the system being out of balance. So when we learn to down-regulate the nervous system and to stop this extra cortisol, we feel so much better in ourselves. And also, we can regulate our emotions more, because when we secrete extra cortisol, that activates the amygdala in the brain, which is where there's fear and anxiety and it kind of more intense emotions. Whereas when we learn to downregulate nervous system and take the cortisol out of our systems, we're more likely to be in the prefrontal cortex, particularly if we're very good at problem solving and very good at kind of downregulating stress and managing our physiology and taking our breath and doing our exercise. We're more likely to be in the prefrontal cortex, and that's the left side. That is the balanced, problem-solving, analytical, reductionist part of the brain. And that's ideally where we want to be able to go to if we choose to go there. So how do you downregulate the cortisol? If you're feeling you're a little bit stressed and there's a bit of cortisol in the system due to just maybe, external stressors in your life, or it can be internal stressors. And these can be things like striving for perfection all the time, not, constantly having yourself under pressure, thinking that you have to be all things to all men, trying to please everybody, thinking you have to be liked by everybody. These are what we call intrapsychic stressors. And they can also push us into this sympathetic nervous system dominance and create this extra activity in the amygdala. So how do you down-regulate the cortisol? Well, the first thing is your breathing. The breathing is absolutely crucial because the quickest way to go from sympathetic dominance into parasympathetic is to slow the breathing down. So most of the time we're breathing about 10 times in a minute. And ideally, we want to bring that down, not all of the time, but just some of the time, to take slow, deep breaths and bring ourselves into 6 times in a minute. So even as you sit there listening, just to put one hand on your chest and another hand on your belly. And I want you just to breathe for me, okay? First of all, I just want you to breathe normally. And I want you to see where are you breathing? Like, is the hand on the belly rising or is the hand on the chest rising? Now, if your breathing is quite shallow, if you're a bit stressed, it will be clavicular breathing. So your upper hand is going to rise more. So just practice taking a deep belly breath in, 3-phase breath where you're breathing into the belly, into the upper abdomen, and into the chest. And just feel the difference that makes in your body. Or another breath that's wonderful to do. It's called 7-11 breathing, where you're inhaling through the nose for 7 and you're exhaling for 11. Any of you who do maybe a yoga practice would be familiar with breath techniques. 7-11 breathing is a brilliant technique to use. And actually, that's the one that I would recommend the most for bringing you from the sympathetic dominance into parasympathetic. And you'll literally feel yourself switch down. But supposing you've been stressed and busy and there's cortisol in the body, how do you break it down? How do you actually get rid of that product in the body so that your nervous system is calmer? Well, if you put in, into YouTube, trauma, polar bears, you'll see footage of a polar bear that has been really stressed out, and the first thing he does to try and relax is he shakes vigorously, okay? Now, as human beings, we need to do the same. What the polar bear is doing is getting rid of that cortisol in the body. And that's what the shaking is for. So our way of doing that is exercising. Now, not everybody can exercise bad necks or bad knees or bad backs, etc. Various different disabilities. If you can exercise, great. Make sure it is part of your daily life. Make sure you do 150 minutes of vigorous exercise in a week, which is really only 30 minutes a day, ideally 5-6 days a week. And that's going to break down cortisol. So your breathing is your first point of call. Then your exercise, 150 minutes rigorous exercise is the second port of call. And then sleep. If you're not sleeping properly, you're more likely to have this activity in the amygdala and less in the prefrontal cortex. A new Canadian research piece has come out saying 25% of us are not sleeping properly. The research was done in Canada, but we can probably extrapolate the results to here, same pandemic. So make sure you are getting a minimum of 7 hours sleep, but I would be suggesting 8, if not 9 hours sleep, and make sure a good first hour of that is before midnight hour, so that you're in your circadian rhythms and you get some non-rapid eye movement, which helps the nervous system regenerate not too many hours after the light goes down, because that's when the melatonin is secreted. So you've got your breathing, your exercise, and your sleep. And I know many of our mental health agencies have been saying these things, but I think having the deeper understanding of what's going on is really, really helpful. Why these mechanisms actually work physiologically. And also, how do you relax? You know, all of us have different ways of relaxing, but a brilliant way, if you're listening to this and you think, gosh, you know, my nervous system has definitely been feeling the stress of this year, a great thing to do is take up a mindfulness and meditation practice. It is absolutely brilliant. For example, mindfulness-based stress reduction. This is what I use in clinic, and normally I use it for myself, but I haven't this week. It's a brilliant way of making sure that you are diminishing the activity in the amygdala and making new, strong neuronal connections in the prefrontal cortex, particularly the left side. Now, it takes 8 weeks to rewire our brains, but what is lovely to know is that with the research on neuroplasticity, we can rewire how our nervous system is. And the reason this is so good to know is so many people will have had difficult childhoods, adverse childhood events, or maybe even in utero, the mum was stressed and that had an effect on the nervous system wiring of the unborn child. You know, there's a lot of trauma research saying we can even inherit a genetic tendency to excess, activity in the amygdala through maybe trauma from our ancestors. So learning that we can rewire the brain and get this extra activity and new neuronal connections in the prefrontal cortex is just brilliant news. So, you know, if any of you listening to this thinking, gosh, I'd like to know more about that, go over to PalousMindfulness.com. That's PALOUSE, PalousMindfulness.com. And that will bring you to a mindfulness-based stress reduction program that lasts over 8 weeks, completely free to do. It's from the University of Massachusetts. Brilliant, brilliant program. So that's, if you're really interested in rewiring and deep relaxation, that's a brilliant thing to do. Be careful as well of too many stimulants like that. If you're high cortisol and you're waking early in the morning because your nervous system is out of balance, and then, you know, you're tired when you wake up, and so you're sitting at your desk, and of course the high cortisol can diminish performance, so you're reaching for the cups of coffee, and then too much coffee is going to make more cortisol in the body, so just to be careful of that. And of course, a great way of rebalancing the nervous system is practicing self-compassion. A lot of us will have what's called an inner critic, or a voice that we've internalized from maybe earlier in our lives that says, oh, you know what, you didn't do that right. Oh, that's a disaster. Oh, you're no good at this. Or so-and-so over there is having a better pandemic than you are. You know, all of these irrational thoughts we can get, particularly when we're tired, because we have mood congruent thoughts. So if we're excess cortisol and we're a little bit low with that and a little bit tired, we'll have anxious thoughts, and our thoughts will say things like that to us. So if we change our internal voice, it says, you know what, you've got this. You know what, okay, it wasn't brilliant, but it was good enough. You've got this. You're doing really well. And, you know, a lot of the research on mindful self-compassion will actually show that that kind of a conversation changes our brains. So it's really interesting, exciting stuff. So I want to move on to the second point, which is about vagal tone. So this is a nerve that is a key part of our parasympathetic rest and digest. It influences breathing, digestive function, heart rate, and all of this, of course, has a big impact on our mental health. So when we increase our vagal tone, we activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Higher vagal tone means our body relaxes faster after stress, and the vagal response reduces stress, and it reduces our heart rate and our blood pressure, and it changes the function of the brain by moving us into parasympathetic. So if you have good vagal tone, your nervous system is going to respond really quickly, bounce back after stress. You feel sharp, alert, you can relax easily, and you're also just more likely to feel happy and resilient. If you've poor vagal tone, you might feel a bit nervy. You could have things like irritable bowel syndrome, for example. So how do you change your vagal tone? How do you improve it? Well, first of all, just to say to you, there's probably a bit of a genetic component with vagal tone. Some of us would be born with good vagal tone, some of us wouldn't be. So, if we don't recover well from stress, if it lingers or we have a tendency to be anxious, that indicates poor vagal tone. But once you know what to do. So some of this overlaps very much with reducing cortisol. For example, your deep breathing back to 6 breaths a minute, your 7-11 breathing, a brilliant way to improve your vagal tone. But another way is chanting, humming, singing. The vagus nerve goes down behind the throat at the back. And when we sing or when we hum, particularly at a low reverberation, a low resonance, that gets the glottis going, and that affects the vagus nerve. So some of you might sing in a choir. That lovely feeling of singing in a choir. And or maybe in the days where we used to go to live performances, please God they will be back soon, but you're singing along with a favorite song and you just feel great. Or a session in a pub, for example, that's actually improving your vagal tone. So I think Tony Bates, some of you may have heard him last Saturday on RTE, and he was absolutely brilliant. He was talking about improving our vagal tone. And an elderly aunt of mine who's 86, and she's really, really struggled in the pandemic, she rang me and she said, Avril, I've heard Tony Bates on the radio, and she said, all I have to do to feel better is start going voo. And this is what Tony Bates was talking about, improving the vagal tone by just doing voo. So she has been wandering around Killiney Hill every morning doing voo. And it's really helping her. But the way he described it, she just completely got it and completely understood how nervous she had felt and that this would help her. So singing, humming, chanting, we've talked about exercise, brilliant for vagal tone. Yoga is brilliant for vagal tone. So with yoga, and some of you can just maybe learn a few postures online. Always check with your doctor, obviously, if you have any issues that would maybe be a bad neck or something, that it would knock it out. But yoga can be like medicine, and there are brilliant teachers online. I'm really fond of the half moon, is a brilliant yoga posture, and the half moon, the tree, the dancer, and the warrior. And these are quite simple. Well, the dancer is a bit more advanced. They're really simple, particularly the warrior. And the warrior has a direct effect on the vagus nerve. And it has a brilliant way of resetting the vagus nerve. So yoga is brilliant, meditation we've talked about. Another really random one is probiotics. If you've been responding to the pandemic with a lot of refined sugars, a lot of processed foods, and maybe a bit more alcohol than you would normally have, then that creates a problem with your gut microbiome, in that you can get bad bacteria in the gut, or the gut microbiome is out of balance. And this vagus nerve is bidirectional. So not only does it come from the brainstem down to the gut, but it's 80% of the nerve fibers in the vagus nerve are afferent. I always get mixed up between afferent and efferent, but afferent, sending messages back from the belly, back up to the brain. And this is why we're talking about balancing ourselves from the bottom up, because we send the messages from the vagus nerve up to the brain. Now, if your tummy has butterflies because you're very stressed and you haven't been doing any self-care, or your gut microbiome is completely out of balance, that sends a message from the belly up to the brain to say, oh, there's something not going right here. Stay on alert. But if you're doing some breathing, you're doing your exercise, you're doing maybe some yoga stretches, whatever works for you, and if you're taking probiotics, for example, to recolonize the gut flora so your microbiome is in good shape, that message goes back up to the brain saying, nothing to see here, this person feels safe. You don't need to stay on alert. We are exquisitely designed as our human physiology. So take your probiotics if you feel that your vagal tone is poor. probably my favorite tip to improve vagal tone is cold water, because any of us could do this. Now, some of you listening might be sea swimmers, and you may be, those crazy people who launch themselves into the Irish Sea or the Atlantic at all times of the year, even when it's very cold, and come out absolutely buzzing and feeling great. Well, what you've done is you've improved your vagal tone. But you don't have to be swimming in the sea to do that. If you have a hot shower in the morning, for the last couple of minutes, just switch on freezing cold water and make sure you spray here in particular. The receptors for the vagus nerve are actually here in the cheeks, and they will send a message to the vagus nerve that you feel safe. So freezing cold shower for the last couple of minutes in the morning, very, very good to reset vagal tone. So there is a link between our nervous system and our emotions, because when we have regulated our nervous system in this way, through all the tips that we talked about, we're more likely to be busy in our prefrontal cortex than we are to be in our amygdala. Because if we feel nervous and are overwhelmed, that has a resonance then in activity in the amygdala, which is where emotion is based. And, our emotions are, not all of our emotions, but a lot of our intense emotions, particularly fear, would have a lot of connections in the amygdala. And some of us would have a tendency to a bigger amygdala or more connections in it, which is why the mindfulness-based stress reduction is brilliant. But our emotions serve a purpose for us, okay? They tell us something. They help us to know what's going on for ourselves. And they say, okay, there's something that you're not happy with here. There's something going on. And they give us an impetus to change and to address important issues. So it's really, really important we listen to our emotions. But sometimes we're in emotional mind where we respond to the stresses in our lives with too much emotion, and our emotions are dysregulated. They're less likely to be dysregulated if the nervous system is calm. So I like to think of the mind in three minds, and this is part of what we call dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT. There is the emotional mind, which is housed in the amygdala, and then there is the practical mind, or the rational mind, and this is in the prefrontal cortex. Now, ideally, we can go from one to the other quite easily. We can have our emotions, we can listen to what they're trying to tell us, and then we can move off into our prefrontal cortex and go into a problem-solving mode. And actually, this movement from one to the other is what we call the wise mind. So I often work with clients on this, and I often remind myself to go into my wise mind. If I'm having an emotional reaction to something, where I would typically have a very strong emotional reaction, is I would be a little technophobic. And this last year, many of you maybe can relate to this. I'm not somebody who'd be great on computers, and I've had to do most of my work, or a lot of my work, on computer. And so sometimes I'm about to do something and the technology will let me down. There'll be a firewall or something random, and I will feel my whole body tense up, and I'll feel myself go into my emotional mind. And of course, when I go into my emotional mind, my thoughts will be congruent and go, oh, there's not going to be an internet connection, or this firewall isn't going to let me in, or whatever it is. And I remind myself, just go into your wise mind, come back up the truck, and go into the problem-solving mind. My kids laugh at me. They say, Mum, you're so calm most of the time, but with technology, you are not a calm person. So I've really had to train myself to back up the truck when I am with technology and go into my wise mind. What's important to know about how we change the brain is the key to growing any psychological resource is to have repeated experiences of it. And these get turned into lasting changes in neural structure and function. So, for example, self-compassion we spoke about, that's incredibly important. When we're too hard on ourselves, we trigger the amygdala, and then, the response is we're full of cortisol. When we are compassionate to ourselves, we release oxytocin, and this helps us to feel safe and reach out to other humans. So it's really important that you, whatever you decide to do for your wellness, do it over and over and over so that it is affecting change in the brain. So, mindful self-compassion, if you just Google that, if any of you want to look into this more, if you Google mindful self-compassion, you'll see there a lot of work by a writer, Kristen Neff, Neff, and she does this lovely technique where you just become aware of the emotions and you find where they are in your body, and then you soften the tissue, the muscles, wherever that holding is. You say you have a knot in your stomach, or say your jaw's too tight, or you find it, you soften, you soothe, and you soothe by just being nice to yourself, saying, look, you've got this, you're okay, you're doing really well. You're kind of talking yourself down, and you allow the emotions to be there, and you're breathing into them. You're down regulating your physiology at the same time as soothing the emotions and being self-compassionate. So that's a lovely technique to use. And I use this a lot with clients at the moment. I'll say to them, where in your body are you feeling that anxiety or that sense of stress? Because a lot of people at the moment, they are, meeting the criteria for clinical anxiety, but actually it's a real nervousness that has been triggered by the pandemic. And maybe there's some unresolved issues there going on for them. So mindful self-compassion can be so helpful, and changing your inner critic. Another technique I wanted to address was savoring. And this is a lovely technique for wellness. So we have a set point of happiness. Okay, so we all have a tendency to be, happy at a certain level. Some people are naturally a little bit happier than other people. And of course, this is all to do with our wiring again. And we can change our happiness set point. But the way people think, oh, I'd love to win the lotto now. That would really make me happy to win the lotto. But what's really interesting in research on lotto winners is that after, I think it's about 18 months, the person who's won the lotto comes back to the same set point of happiness that they had before they won the lotto. So they have this great well-being for maybe 18 months or 2 years, and then they revert back. Similarly, if somebody's had something really difficult happen to them, or they're dealing with a bereavement, or they've lost their job, or something really difficult, but they go back, initially they feel terrible and they're really struggling with it, and all of us who've had bereavement will know this, but you come back in most cases, not all, not 100% of cases, but in most cases, we do come back to a set point of happiness. And the research indicates that it's not life events that are going to move the dial and move this set point upwards for us. It's actually inner processes that we take on that change the dial, move the dial. And I think this is really interesting. And again, you're probably tired of me talking about mindfulness, but again, the mindfulness-based stress reduction program, like the MBSR, Palouse Mindfulness, that, because it changes the wiring in the brain, it actually helps you access more positive, healthy, happy emotions more easily. So that moves the dial. So mindfulness definitely helps improve our happiness set point. But another thing that helps us move our happiness set point is learning to savor, to be absolutely in the moment. And this moving back to the set point of happiness, by the way, the technical name is Hedonic Adaptation. And it's literally just moving back to a set point. So what reduces hedonic adaptation? Well, savoring. And this is something we can all learn to do. And it is the act of stepping outside of an experience to review and appreciate it. So there are things that we do that help us to enhance savoring and to do more savoring. So, first of all, it's being absolutely present for the experience. And I had this experience recently. My son bought his first car, and he asked me for a driving lesson. And my daughter sat in the back with her dogs, and we just had this moment where I thought, this is a moment in time I'll never have again, his first driving lesson, and that I'm teaching him to drive. And I had this sense of sorrow for a moment, or wistfulness, because my thought was, oh, this is such a precious moment, and it's so fleeting, and it will be gone. And I had to bring myself back to savor the moment and go, aren't I so lucky at this exact moment in my life to be having this lovely experience. So this is savoring, and it's really worthwhile teaching yourself to do it. And the things that enhance it are if you tell another person about how good it felt, sharing moments with other people, so that helps us savor. Thinking of just how lucky we are to have this exact experience in this exact moment. So a lot of savoring is also being fully present for the moment and appreciating the tiniest details of that moment. But oftentimes, we do things unbeknownst to ourselves that stop us savoring the moment. We're focusing on the future. We're thinking, oh, this is going to be over soon. We're comparing this moment to something else. Or we're thinking, oh, this isn't going to last forever. Or maybe this is never going to be as good again as this. Oh, this could be better this way. Or maybe, I don't deserve this moment. So teach yourself to savor moments. It's a really precious thing to do. And it's another thing that stops this hedonic adaptation. And it can be the smallest thing that you learn to savor. I remember a client saying to me in the clinic, in the depth of the pandemic, she was saying that she had done a course in the School of Philosophy, and they had done a lot of training around savoring. And she said she would go down in the morning, she would lay out the most perfect breakfast table for herself, and she'd have some wildflowers from her garden. She would put on her coffee pot, and she would just look at the flowers. As the pot bubbled up, she'd smell the aroma of the coffee. And, she said just that early morning quietness at her table before the family got up with the flowers and the coffee. And that set her up for the day. So I thought that was a lovely example of savoring. We've talked a lot about mindfulness, and basically mindfulness is changing the brain by changing the mind. And it's mindful, being perfectly mindful in the moment, and non-judgment of the moment. And a brain that learns to be mindful is an integrated brain. So it's the practice of open and non-judgmental awareness in the present moment. And mindfulness is to the physical, to our brains, what exercise is to the physical body. So many of you probably exercise for wellness, and the way it keeps you fit and flexible and well. And mindfulness is the equivalent, only it's for your neuronal connections instead of your body. And it can also be described as being fully awake in our lives and for the exquisite vividness of each moment. And we forget that actually we are only alive in this exact moment. There's only this moment. And then, of course, we let go of the breath, and there is only the next moment. So just training ourselves to pay attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally, is just brilliant. That is what mindfulness is. And when we're mindful, we're not in the future. And when we're in the future, we anticipate troubles and worries, and we may have all kinds of anxieties. And when we're in the past, we could have sorrow or regret. When we're in the present, none of that happens. So human beings are actually at their optimal when they are in the present. So mindfulness and being present is my tip there. The next one is train yourself to be optimistic. And again, some of us, just from the way we were reared in our childhood, may be more optimistic thinkers than other people. But the research shows that optimistic people are happier than pessimistic people. And optimistic people expect that they can solve problems successfully, and they expect that they can accomplish their goals, and they expect to be happy. But pessimism is often learnt in childhood. So if you have that tendency, accept it, name it, and just work on being positive. Decide that you're going to change the way you think about things. We have 50 to 60 thoughts in the brain every day, and there is a proclivity to focus on the things that are not going well for us. And that's very normal, kind of a design in the human psyche. But you can decide, well, I'm not going to be like that. I'm going to change the way I think, and I'm going to make sure that I have more positive thoughts than negative ones. And I'm not saying, suppress anything, because it's so key. We never suppress our emotions, that we listen and are guided by our emotions. But, listening to all of our thoughts, if they tend to be negative, leads us a merry dance. So this is another reason why mindfulness can be so helpful, because it gives us a dispassion to our thoughts. We learn we are not our thoughts, and we can step back and separate out from them. So we can learn to be optimistic, and remembering that what we experience over and over changes the brain. Another top tip is gratitude. And gratitude is just basically the quality of being thankful. And a tendency, it's a mindset where we show appreciation for what one has. It improves our physical health. We know that people who are grateful have fewer aches and pains. And it also has a huge psychological effect. It reduces a multitude of negative emotions, including reducing envy, resentment, frustration, regret. And part of the reason I think that we get such positive side effects from gratitude is it teaches us, just again, it brings us back to savoring, but also it reduces our levels of social comparison, which is something humans tend to do. So Emmons, who's kind of the famous researcher on gratitude, he has shown that when you learn to be grateful, it absolutely increases your happiness levels and reduces your depression levels. And grateful people sleep better, for example. And grateful people tend to have higher self-esteem. And this is, of course, because they don't do the social comparison. So Martin Seligman, who, if any of you are interested in positive psychology, there's a great website, positivepsychology.com, and you'll find there a lot of research by a particular man called Martin Seligman, who's probably the father of positive psychology, and he's done a huge amount of research on the power of gratitude to transform us and to make us psychologically healthier. But, one of the things he does is he gets people to write letters to people who've been kind to them. And, maybe it's somebody's birthday, and, instead of buying them a gift, you just write them a letter as to what you're grateful for about having them in your life. And he's shown in the research that actually this improves our well-being when we do these kind of things. And there's another lovely piece of research on gratitude in relationships. And I think this is really important, because I know a lot of people have been locked down for a long time with families, and in some ways, maybe we've been almost overexposed to each other. The intensity of being with our loved ones all of the time can sometimes create conflict or bring unresolved issues to the fore. But in this one particular piece of research in 2015 by Barton, they measured couples on what they called proneness to divorce. And they wanted to see, would gratitude have an effect on their proneness to divorce? And so they got them to just practice being grateful just for the other actually being in their lives, for being there. And they found that actually that improved, that alone, just saying, well, this bothers me and that bothers me, but I'm grateful just that this person is in my life. And that alone helped improve the communication and reduced the proneness to divorce. So gratitude can just be a really helpful thing to do, and it can be, as simple as just keeping a gratitude journal. Writing down, in the evening, things that you're really, really grateful for. What were the things in your day that you're so thankful for? Or it can be to stop in your tracks a few times in a day and just say, what is it that I am grateful for at this moment? And it's amazing how it's a mind shift. It just changes. It's like changing the gear in the car. So we're coming, slowly to the end there of the talk this morning, and I know I've bombarded you with a lot of information there. We've looked at the importance of down-regulating nervous system function through reducing cortisol levels or improving vagal tone. And we've looked at the role of sleep, exercise, breathing, cold showers, probiotics, chanting, humming, singing, all of these different ways that are going to down-regulate nervous system function if we've poor vagal tone or are tending to go towards the sympathetic dominance. We've talked as well awareness of the practical mind, the emotional mind, and the wise mind, and holding that awareness and training ourselves to go into wise mind. And we have talked a little bit about savoring and mindfulness, gratitude, self-compassion, and we've talked there about the role of optimism. So we're just coming up to 11:45. So I'm just wondering, does anybody have any questions there or anything that they would like to comment on, anything that maybe they have found useful during this pandemic? Have any of you taken up any of these practices? Have any of you done mindful self-compassion or mindfulness? Or have any of you been doing, cold showers? Or just love to hear if anybody wanted to just say what has been working for them during the pandemic, or ask a question. Okay. Okay, so one other thing before I direct you to networking, if you're interested in kind of the neuropsychology of this, some of you I know are in HR and that, there is a lovely model called the SCARF model, SCARF, and basically the SCARF model is a model that we use, within companies where you look at how you make sure people are down regulating the nervous system and not being, going into threat activation and not reducing cortisol by, giving them real autonomy and certainty and fairness and relatedness. It's just a lovely model. Some of you may be interested in it. So thank you so much to Zivo today for inviting me in to talk to all of you. And thank you all for coming. And I hope I'm going to see you again. But the networking now is taking place. So maybe some of you want to go over there and enjoy networking with each other and have a lovely long weekend. And I hope you'll be able to put some of these practices in place. Okay, thank you very much.